I'm just going to be back at 6. Do I need to sign as well? Well, I'll send you an email and tell you signing the names.
Accesso να αρχίσει να μπαίνει για κανένας. Πήγαινε μιλά λίγο, όχι εσύ είμαστε, εγώ βάζω εντάξει. Θα πάμε oh. Hello, test. We are live. 1, 2, 3. Checking in the bag. Sound check. Marino. Okay, sound check successful.
Όσο πιο καλά μας πεντρεύει και πιο καθαρά στη
Κάτσε εδώ το ναι, εντάξει, δεν έχει πει κανείς, απλά θα το κάνουμε ρεκόρ. Okay. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the first Cyprus Board Game live stream. Yeah, applause, that's a hey. First time ever. So, we are honored today because we have with us somebody actually from Cyprus that has designed, am I correct, a board game that we've been launching in Kickstarter in January 22. And we're very happy that we will host him here together with us to give us a little bit of a background and an exclusive first of the board game. So, Stavros.
Hello.
Hello. Just keep close to the microphone.
I will try my best.
Okay.
It's also my first time, so be gentle. So first of all, I'd like to thank Cyprus Board Gamers for for letting me share our game with everybody, both here and online. And actually, I will start by saying that I met my current business partners through Cyprus Board Gamers through a post on your group. So I'm, more than grateful for the community that you've built here, for bringing people who like games together, board games in particular. And hopefully this is going to be a game that's going to be embraced by gamers both here in Cyprus and abroad. Worldwide. So, okay, so let me just start by talking a little bit about the game. So the game is called Gardens of Babylon. It's a Euro-style game for 1 to 4 players. So we also have solo rules that you can use. Yes, I'm glad everybody likes that. To be honest, I had to fight a little bit to get that in there, but in the end, it turned out to be the right decision.
So I have to ask: is it AI based or is it achievement based? Or I'm a solo gamer, as you can understand.
Yes. Well, it's more. It's a little bit like solitaire. So it's essentially a mix of chance and strategy and tactics. I'm talking about the solo game in particular. I'm not a big fan of putting complex AI on a simple game like this. The game is supposed to be, I know this sounds like a cliche, that it's simple to learn, difficult to master, and that was our goal. We always try to, because this is not the only game that we're designing. We have other games in the pipeline as well, and we always strive to have this balance of simple enough rules, but enough depth, right, to the game to make it engaging. Okay, so Gardens of Babylon. Let me just first say that I've been designing games for the past 4 or 5 years, but Gardens of Babylon was the first game where both me and my regular team of testers felt it was the right game to commercialize. It's a unique feature, as you can possibly see from the components. I'm going to hold them up and hopefully you can see them, is the fact that you can use the hex tiles as cubes. Okay, and you can start building sort of a 3-dimensional structure out of these flat hex tiles. Okay, and this all started from a simple observation. I was just browsing the web one day. I came across a table that was using this 2.5D, as it's called, illusion, and I thought, hey, that looks like a good idea for a game. And then eventually this blossomed, pun intended, into the Gardens of Babylon. So the game, as I mentioned, is very, very simple. Each player, first of all, we start off by mixing all the tiles into a pile.
Can I ask for the theme, because I'm a
yes.
fan of theme? So
yes,
what's the objective? What's the theme? And
well, the theme is Babylonian. So
okay.
we thought, again, I thought this is something that is not something you encounter all that frequently in board games. A lot of the games nowadays are either fantasy-based or Vikings or pirates or things like that. So this is a less common theme, so we think it makes the game stand out. It's also a non-threatening theme.
Take that then. No, take that.
Actually, well, the theme is not threatening, but the rules, as you'll see, and I have some pictures of friends, the before and after pictures. The games actually can be quite cutthroat. That's why we make the joke, can you make it in the cutthroat world of competitive gardening? Okay. So it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it has some truth in it. The theme is non-threatening, and we've had comments from people approaching us at various conventions where we've demoed the game. They said, "Hey, I'd like to buy this game, play with my girlfriend, or play with my family because it doesn't have a violent theme." Okay. But having said that, the rules themselves can bring about conflict, in the group, yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of strike that tone between the accessibility of the theme and kind of the challenges that the mechanics bring to the table. So
perfect. Let's see a little bit how it plays.
A little bit about so
this is a prototype. We have to make a disclaimer.
Yes.
So
Thank
this
you for
is
that.
not the final product.
This is a homemade prototype, so this was printed and assembled at home. So the colors that you see here are not representative of. This is the final art, but the colors are obviously not as vivid as the final product, and we're still tweaking the quality of the components on the final product as well. Now we start off by assembling the base for the game, and the reason we do this, the reason we have the base is first of all to make sure that the extent of the structure we're going to be building is clearly delineated, right? So people know how far they can build. It also allowed us to put some Babylonian themed artwork on the tiles to bring people into the theme. We couldn't do this as much on the tiles because the tiles are functional. So we need to make sure that only the salient features are emphasize the ones that actually play into the mechanics, and then the rest kind of recedes in the background. If you want a point of comparison, for example, in Carcassonne, right, you mostly focus on the roads, for example, or the cities. There's some of the shields. There's some decorative elements, obviously, there as well, but they're supposed to kind of recede in the background and allow you to focus on, you know, what you're supposed to be looking at. So we need to strike that balance, obviously, with the tiles. So with the base tiles, we went to town. We asked our artist, you know, just go crazy.
The base doesn't have any gameplay elements, let's say.
No, it's basically just for as a starting point, as I mentioned, to kind of delineate the extent of the structure, and it also provides a solid foundation for people to kind of you know, for all those obsessive compulsive types to push the tiles closely together and have a perfect structure with no, you know, no
He's
gaps.
one of those guys, yes.
I'm one of those guys.
I get it.
The homemade prototype you see here actually doesn't show this, but these are actually going to be puzzle pieces that fit together into one big base. I didn't do this on the homemade prototype because even the slightest misalignment means that the rest of the structure doesn't fit quite perfect. So for OCD types like myself, it actually makes it worse. So I prefer to have it like that. Okay, so we start off by shuffling all of the tiles in a pile and placing them face down. I should mention here that we have 78 tiles, and no two tiles are the same. They're all unique. They're all unique, and they fit in every possible way. Okay, so those of you watching at home, you can bring out your calculators and try to, you know, estimate the possible number of combinations, right? Number of unique plays. So obviously this gives the game a lot of replayability. You will never build the same structure, the same pyramid, the same gardens again.
And there's no, in the strategy that you usually say, I know there are like 3 of these pieces and only one is out, so there's no that such an element in the strategy.
You could do that to a certain extent, but in all honesty, you have to be Rain Man to, you know, to keep track of all the possibilities. I get it. But you can get a general sense. Okay. And since, because it sounds to me that you're kind of interested in the subject, so I'll go a little bit further. So the reason we come up with 78 tiles is because we have 6 navigation patterns. So that's a combination of stairs and staircases that you can use to move around the gardens, and 13 irrigation patterns. So as you will see, the gardens have, actually I can show you now, the gardens have this little pools in the middle, right? And then you have incoming and outgoing channels.
I'll just like get it a little bit slower.
Okay. So there's 13 possible patterns for how the water flows in and out of these pools. And then there's 6 different patterns, unique patterns of how you move around the structure. So multiply those together and you end up with 7 kits. We also wanted to add, well, again, going with the theme, as you know, the Babylonians were the ones to introduce the zodiac, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And they're the ones who gave us 360 degrees. A lot of these concepts came from Babylonian culture. So the number 12 is a very, very important number in that culture. So that's why you start off the game by, you know, the first layer of the structure is made up of 12 tiles. We wanted to kind of keep a little bit of that in the game as well. Now, going back to the rules once again, I keep digressing, so apologies for that. So we shuffle the tiles into a pile, and then we take 4 tiles, which are the common tile pool. Okay, and place them right size up. That's another challenge that we discovered with our isometric tiles. Sometimes people get confused which side is up.
I get it. I was about to say this.
Yes. And so we indicate both in the rules. We make sure people understand that we have this little terrace up at the top that always needs to be facing up. And we had our artists also add trees and sort of bushes growing out of the structure so that people will know which way is up. After a while, it gets, people get the hang of it, but, we want to make sure everybody understands. That's another function for the base as well, because it has the little terraces, right? So once you place that, it already gives you a hint about how to continue building this structure. We also give each player a number of gardeners. So these are our little gardeners. These are off-the-shelf wooden meeples. But we are actually designing custom meeples and tokens. So these are our seeds for the game. One of the things that I like about board games, and I think we all appreciate about board games, is the fact that you can take this meeple, right? You can take this little abstract shape, and then you project your imagination onto that little component. And in our game, it's a gardener, but you can take this, transplant, and put it in Carcassonne. It's a knight or a farmer. You can move it in some other game, and it becomes, a fierce warrior. And that's one of the things that I think we all appreciate about board games, is the fact that we also get to participate, right, with our imagination, with our own ideas into the game. So each player takes a number of gardeners. This is dependent on the number of players. So with 2 players, each player gets 12 gardeners. And then we also have 36 seeds represented by these little discs. Again, the final product will have custom components.
Tokens.
Yes.
Tokens.
Seed tokens. And that does not change with the number of players. We found out that it's really doesn't change the game much to keep all the seeds for all configurations of the game. So we've kept that. Also, it's a lot harder to take those 36 seeds and start counting out the ones you want to keep. So ultimately, it didn't affect gameplay, and we just went for the simpler gamer experience. Now, on each turn, each player has to do 4 simple steps. So the first step is select one of the 4 tiles in the tile pool and build it add it to the structure. Okay. So in terms of strategy, you would pick one piece over another for several reasons. One is to help your faction, your gardener guild, right, advance and get sort of the higher ground on the structure, because every tile is worth a certain number of points based on its distance from the
higher you are, the bigger amount of points.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where this sort of pyramid structure really helps us, because the scarcity is directly correlated with the value of each tile. So obviously, you're trying to help yourself advance or block your opponent. So if your opponent is hoping to get that staircase and kind of move up the structure, you can place a tile there that doesn't have a staircase on their side, and you block them. So you can do this for both reasons. So you place your tile, and then you have an option to place a gardener and then move them up the structure. So when you're moving, you have to move either up or down a flight of stairs. Okay, and just our luck, we don't have one with archway. Okay, we have one here. Or you can move laterally through an archway. Okay.
Move to the next.
Yes. So you always move from one terrace to another. Okay. So it's always from one terrace to another. Another restriction when you're building, you cannot build a dangling structure. So you cannot place a tile like this. It always has to be placed on top of 2 existing tiles. And again, this is where the base helps us, because by sticking to this rule, it restricts the construction and eventually leads to the pyramid, to the pyramidal structure. Now, when you are moving, you can move up to 3 times. So
just to keep it in order, pick one,
place it,
then you can put in your meeple, your gardener.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you can move them.
Okay. That's one phase now, or
yes, no, that's the 4 steps. So the first step, pick a tile, place it. Second step, take a meeple and move it around.
Or if you already have one, you can move.
You can move an existing one.
Okay.
And then and you can do this up to 3 times. So you can move your meeple up to 3 times. It has to be the same meeple, the same gardener. Okay.
So you have something like 3 movement points for one gardener.
For one gardener. And the way we justify that is because you're doing this in the heat, the scorching Babylonian heat, you get heat exhaustion, so you have to stop after 3 moves. Okay. But there's another little rule that movement, and that is
you have nowhere to go.
you have nowhere to go, or if you land on a tile that doesn't have a seed in its pool, then because you're so thirsty, you're gonna stop and get some water. So every time you encounter a terrace, a tile, to say, that doesn't have a seed in it, you have to stop. Okay, and then you have the option of planting a seed on that terrace. Okay, the next gardener that comes along, if you know, it could be your gardener or it could be a rival gardener, they can move past that
because it has
tile because it has a seed already. Okay, or a third option is you have your gardener and you have another gardener that's waiting on that tile. So if you encounter your own gardener, he gives you some water, okay? So you can keep on moving. So you can ignore the fact that you don't have a seed there because you get water from your ally. But not only does he give you water, he resets your movement points back to 3. Okay, so again, that's an opportunity for more emergent play. If you position your gardeners just right, you can actually start by placing a garden all the way to the base and then move them all the way to the top. Okay, so but also you have to keep track of, you know, strategically planting your seeds, because remember, every time you plant a seed, you open the way for your gardeners, but also for the rival gardeners. Okay, so you cannot stall them if your tile is planted. Now, this is what makes the game a little more cutthroat, and I would say it's the most important.
If there is a friendly gardener on your way, what happens? It doesn't help you, I guess.
It doesn't help you. It doesn't give you anything to drink. So if it's unplanted, you still have to stop, right? But there's no other interaction between
if it's planted,
the gardeners. You can move past.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you have to keep your eye on the terrace to see on the pool to see whether you can move past or not. Okay. Now let's just assume that this little red guy was here and this little yellow guy was here, and the yellow guy had claimed this tile. Okay, because this is on the first row, he gets 1 point.
That's immediately or at the end of the game?
At the end of the game.
Okay.
So this is a Euro-style game. So one of the major characteristics of Euro-style games is obfuscating the scoring rules, right? To try and keep them engaged in the game. If you know you're too far behind, then you might lose interest and just stop playing. Or if you know who the leading player is, you might try and kind of focus on just that player. So, you know, you have king making and forgot what the other term is king slaying, I guess, would be an appropriate term in that case. Now, this is what makes the game sort of, you know, the cutthroat competitive world of gardening. So I can plant my seed here, right? But as you can see, this particular side, we have 2 water channels connecting, an outgoing from the one that I planted and an incoming from the one below. Okay, and again, this is where the 3D, pseudo 3D structure comes into play. So you can imagine now the seeds getting carried by the stream, okay, and you can now claim this tile as well, and this seed gets pushed out of the water and back into its owner's hand. So you can think of this a little bit like Othello or those kinds of games where at any point in time the game can kind of switch. We've actually had this quite a bit at the various conventions.
So you go very high and it's connected. The stream is connected. It can go like
exactly with one move. You can claim a lot of tiles. Again, strategically, you may want to leave a lot of tiles unplanted, so that that will stall your opponents, right? And then, but then if you do that, you're foregoing the chance of earning those points. So unless you're building more cascades, you might lose those points permanently. So you have to kind of balance that in your strategy. So we've, as I was saying, we've had a lot of examples at various conventions where we've demonstrated the game, and it was always, I noticed it was usually moms and their kids. So the poor mom had this nice little area carved out for herself, you know, just same color, all the seeds nicely, you know, aligned in their pools, and then the kid comes along, places a tile, plants on top, and then takes everything using one fell swoop. So the game can turn around very, very quickly, and this is what makes it sort of, you know, more cutthroat. So it is a take that mechanic, but hopefully it's a fun one. So
I guess you always have to anticipate this kind of move from the other players.
Mhm.
And I started about thinking in higher player counts, they might be even working against the leading player. You know, just get up there, screw him, and then let's try to win the game.
In most play tests that we've had, because we've been play testing this game for about a year now, as I mentioned, the scoring rules are purposely obfuscated so that people don't really keep track of score all that well. But but we did have a group of 4 Magic the Gathering players who counted the points like 3 times
every round
throughout the game, and they did gang up against the leader in the end.
I play Magic, so.
Okay, so yeah, it was a magical play test. Now the game ends. And the last step after, so placing a tile, placing and moving a meeple, and planting a seed. The last step is to replenish the pool. Okay, and that's your last step. Now the game ends when the last tile is placed. So when the pyramid is complete, the last player gets to complete their turn, and that's the end of the game. And then we go into the scoring phase. Now, there's one thing I should mention about the scoring. You may have noticed that some of the tiles have these additional panels with these little flowers on them. Again, it's just our luck that we've found only with just one.
There's even one more here, I guess.
Yeah, but let me give you also an example with 2 flowers, and there's others with 3 and 4. Actually, there's only one with 4. Now, these flower panels represent extra points, bonus points. So, for example, in this arrangement, let's just assume that poor yellow guy still has his tile. So the yellow player has planted on the first row, so he gets 1 point. And then because there's 1 flower on his panel, he gets 1 additional point. So he gets 2 points. The red player is on the second row, so he gets 2 points because he's on the second row. And he also has a flower panel, so he gets 1 extra point, so he gets 3 points. What are those extra points for? They represent tiles that are either harder to access, right, or harder to defend. For example, this tile gets incoming water from both sides. So if your opponent doesn't cascade on you from the left side, they might cascade on you from the right side. So it's harder for you to defend that tile. You get rewarded by hanging on to that tile to the end of the game with that extra point. Likewise, if you have a tile that doesn't give you much movement, you see if we have an example of that here. For example, this one that gets 2 points. This one has no stairs, so only an archway. So if you place this, you have to wait at least 2 more turns to be able to claim it, because you have to build around it to be able to claim it. Okay, and again, you're rewarded for your, for your tenacity by getting 2 extra points. Okay.
So with the archway, you just go from one to the other. You can't stay on the one that has the archways.
Yes, the archway is just for moving laterally. So you cannot stop here, for example. Again, movement is always from one terrace to another. Okay, and the last little thing I want to share with you, I'm just going to slightly move these around just to kind of make it a little bit more like an actual game. So when you're done with the game, you can start scoring by placing these tiles that again kind of play on this 2.5D sort of or three-dimensional concept. I'm just going to complete a small pyramid here. So the scoring tiles have a dual function. First is
The points multiplier.
they give you the points, exactly. So it's easier for you to keep track. Okay, I'm getting 1 point here, 2 points here, 3 points here. Okay, and then what you can do is you can take a meeple, and they also build a scoring track that you can use. So if I'm Mr. Red, I have 2 points plus 1, so I'm going to move 3, and then let's just assume I have another one here. So I get 3 points plus 1, I get 4. So another 4, so I move to 7, and so on and so forth. So you can keep track of the score because the scoring can get quite involved without needing a calculator or pen and paper or anything like that. Another sort of hidden, let's just say, cultural reference. This sort of meandering way of moving, known as boustrophodon, is the way that the Babylonians and the Egyptians used to write on their clay tablets. They would write left to right, and then they would turn it around and go right to left. So when you're reading, you go, back and forth like that. So that's a little allusion, let's just say, to that.
That's some concept. Good research done on the thing, right? Yeah.
Too much free time.
He's a historical freak other than OCT.
I might as well be wearing a have no life So this is pretty much the game in short. As you can see, very simple rules, but quite a few things to think about. One of the things I constantly think about at Cackleberry Games is we call it meaningful decisions per minute. So when we're designing a game, we always try to think how many decisions, meaningful decisions, can a player make on each turn, and the sort of the frequency of those meaningful decisions is what drives our design decisions. So when you're building a tile, you have to think, okay, I need to advance, I need to think about the cascades, I need to block my opponent. When you're planting, if I plant now, I claim the points, but I allow my opponent to move past, so maybe I want to hold off, but if I'm going to hold off, I need to build a cascade later on to claim those points, and so on and so forth. So there's always, an interesting decision at every step.
And I like the fact that in the beginning you might be thinking lightheartedly, I'll just place this here, but this will affect later on the game very much as you go much higher. So I like the way it builds up, in terms of decision. You might think I don't have much to think about in the beginning, but no, I guess that will be a huge effect. And I will go to the question, how does the solo work?
So the solo game, we try to stick as much as possible to the actual game rules. And you play the game as a two-player game, and you play against the king.
Okay.
So we try to keep it. Actually, I should have started with that. The reason we're all here is because I'm never going to pronounce this right. So King Neb.
I've seen that name in the group. Okay.
I can't even say it in Greek, but the king, or look it up. Anyway, that king who built the legendary gardens of Babylon has invited the Gardeners Guild to come and decorate the gardens, build and decorate the gardens. And whoever manages to do it best is going to be the one who to earn the king's favor. That's sort of the thematic goal of the game. But in the solo game, you play against the king himself. Now the king has some special tricks up his sleeve, so he doesn't need any gardeners. So if red is the player, right, the king is yellow, so the king doesn't need any gardeners. So you have to first start by placing a gardener on each base tile. Okay, and since you have 12 and there's 13 base tiles, you basically just have to pick one that you're not going to place a gardener on. And then the other difference is as you have the tile pool, the king always draws from the pile and plays second. So you have your tile pool, and you always have to build left to right.
Okay.
Same thing for the king. Okay.
And you get to choose, the king doesn't choose.
Yeah, the king doesn't choose. The king picks randomly from the pile you get from your tile pool. Okay. And you continue building the structure left to right. Once you complete a row, you go up to the next row. So you build this left to right. I know there's a lot of computer science people here, so think of it like a raster, right? Like the old raster kind of drawing that we used to do, some of us of a certain age, let's just say. So you build the pyramid one row at a time, left to right. And as I mentioned, the king doesn't need any gardeners. He plants on every single tile he places. Okay.
I already think about the disaster, drawing something and then just swiping down all your seeds. Okay.
Yes. So the king could potentially create a cascade that can take away your points, but at the same time, keep in mind that he's also defenseless. I mean, you're an intelligent opponent. The king is just going through the motions, doesn't really have any decision making. The other restriction is that if you decide to plant on a tile, so let's just say red decides to, ended up here. If you decide to plant on a tile that has a cascade, you have to take the cascade. In a normal game, you choose how far down you're going to cascade. But in the solo game, you always have to do a full cascade. Okay, and keep in mind that this might actually split, so you may be cascading in 2 or 3 or 4 directions down the line.
That's good, right? That's a good thing.
That could be good. Well,
in the game, why would you not do it?
You would not do it for the following reason. Remember that every time you knock those opponent's seeds out of the water, you give them back to your opponent.
Oh, okay, now I get it.
So now you're claiming the lower levels,
higher, right?
and they're going to build them higher. Okay, so that's another trade-off you have to take into account. So the king could end up, I mean, it might look like a good idea, just wipe the king off the board, and then you realize that you planted all your seeds, right? You have no seeds left. The king is full of seeds and just going, at the higher levels, just claiming all the points, and it can make quite a difference. Also, the king not needing to actually move tile can take that sweet, 4 extra point tile with no stairs, right? in one move, whereas it would take you 3 or 4 moves to claim that tile. Now, if you want to make the game more challenging, then you can reduce your tile pool down to 3 or even 2 tiles. So you have fewer options, right? And then the last step to make the game even more challenging, you're not really playing against the king, you're playing against yourself. So you're trying to top your previous top score. So that gives you another challenge there. So again, the solo rules were designed to be as compatible as possible with the normal game rules, but also avoiding any complex AI and corner cases, in keeping with the simplicity of the game and sort of the depth of the gameplay.
Perfect.
But I hope that even solo players will share this experience with fellow board gamers.
No, thank you for putting a solo mode there for people who have small kids. I think it's a good opportunity maybe for any questions either from people joining us or for people here. That might be questions for the game or questions to Stavros directly. Come on, what's your favorite game?
Actually, it's right here. You guys are playing it tonight. It's Viticulture, is one of my favorite games. But 2 copies. Yes, I saw that. It's like famous. Viticulture. You should be serving wine tonight, I think. But Viticulture is a favorite of mine. I also like Scythe.
Okay.
So I'm a
same designer.
I'm a Stegmaier. Yeah, I'm a Stegmaier fanboy. So I do like I like both his games, but I also like what he does for the community. How much he's sharing the community and how active he is and we'll sort of be studying and reading a lot of his articles and watching his videos and learning a lot from him. So we're grateful to him on many levels, not just the joy we get out of his games, but also the knowledge that he shares. And I also Elias is over there, so I also like Dungeons and Dragons.
That was a surprise.
So that's how I actually met my collaborators on Cackleberry Games, and I still think that if you look at the more successful games of the last few years, but also pretty much most video games, everything just tries to kind of emulate that experience you get from Dungeons and Dragons or from sort of role-playing games in general. It's very hard to emulate that, especially with a video game. And at this point, I should also mention that another reason why I like board games is you take our game and you don't like something about it, you can change the rules. You can't do that with a video game. You cannot make it your own. But with a board game, you can make it your own. You can make up a house rule and say, I think that cascade should be limited to this many levels or something like that. So you can take the game. Actually, we have one very industrious, let's just say, poster on Board Game Geek, who's been constantly sending us back comments about house rules he's been trying with the game, and it's so great to have someone you've never met take your game and kind of try and make it their own, and kind of again, for me, that's a big plus of board games that video games cannot emulate, and that's why the experience you get out of a board game or a role-playing game cannot be emulated, let's just say, or matched in a video game. But we like video games too.
Yes.
Video gamers, still, please buy our product.
So, questions, maybe we have any questions from online, from the moderator over there.
Are you having a lot of pledge levels for the Kickstarter?
So we have to repeat the question just to have
Yes,
it in there.
so the pledge levels. Yes, there's going to be several pledge levels, but to be honest, I don't have the details because I'm not handling that personally. I try to focus on sort of the game design and delegate this task to Rob, our amazing marketing guy.
Or exclusive.
We're considering, yes, Kickstarter exclusives and other ways to make sure that people who back the Kickstarter also get something for the fact that they're going to be supporting us early on. And yes, for sure, that's going to be in place. But at the same time, again, we wanted to keep the campaign sort of simple. This is a simple game. It's not a Simon game where you're basically buying it for all the plastic, right? And all
paint it.
and yes, but it's a simpler game, so we want people to focus on. This is a very accessible game that you can play with your family, you can play with your friends, and it has enough depth to it that more experienced players can also enjoy this. They will not be bored. Some of our play testers at conventions have compared this game to chess. I know chess players online or here are probably saying no.
Yeah,
but
no.
But it does have. I hesitate to call it a strategic game. I call it more a tactical game because it can change at any moment. Once you reveal that next tile in the tile pool, it might open up new possibilities. So you can't really build a long-term strategy. You have to constantly adjust to whatever the game gives you at any turn.
I think the only common thing I find with chess is the anticipation, what the opponent will do, because you do that in chess. So I would do this here also. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why we also introduced the 4-tile pool, is to give people sort of some insight into what their opponents might do on their next turn. Of course, you always have that fourth one that gets revealed that introduces an element of of chance. But again, this is trying to sort of have this balance between the random elements and the sort of the strategic elements, because otherwise, in a purely strategic game, you would never beat the better player.
The experienced one.
The experienced
knows
one.
all the tips and tricks.
So you always need that element of chance. You don't want it to be overwhelming, right? You don't want it to trump skill. But yeah, it's we find that it makes the game sort of appeal to a broader audience.
Okay. Any more questions?
Here.
Yes.
What are the challenges or benefits of developing a game in Cyprus?
Oh,
Okay,
that's a very local question. Thank you for that.
So the question is, what are the challenges or benefits of developing a game in Cyprus? Well, what I have discovered over the past 4 or 5 years is that through groups such as your own, there's a wonderful community of board gamers here in Cyprus. We may not have the size or scope of other markets like Germany, for example, which is the main market in Europe, or France, or the UK, or the US now, thanks to Catan. That whole market has opened up to board games. So late to the party, but they always, they will always come out swinging. So I would say I don't see much of a challenge. I think we have the people here who will appreciate these games. Maybe they won't contribute as much financially in sort of the grand scope of things, but we do have people here who are willing to try these games and give us feedback and kind of appreciate them. We certainly have the talent, I believe, as well, and the know-how. Well, I'm not talking about myself.
That's an example.
But I mean, we have people here.
We have another one in the background too.
I know of at least 2 who are here, who are designing games, and for me, this has been a very, very rewarding experience designing board games. I come from a user experience background, so I've been sort of trained to do a lot of user testing and to make my designs usable and sort of user friendly. And one of the many things I like about board game design is the fact that you can only design a game through playtesting.
Yes.
So you cannot avoid that. It's an essential part of the process. This game that you see here, I would say I would even credit my playtesters as co-designers. A lot of the things that you see, and we are going to be publishing some articles on the evolution of the game, and you'll be able to see all the different stages of our design. And a lot of the things a lot of the ideas came about through either observing the players and what they were struggling with, or through suggestions that they gave us. We never take, and that's another thing that we learn in UX, you never take the suggestion sort of verbatim. You have to think about it and think what's behind it and try and solve the problem. Sometimes, yes, the solution that your playtester is suggesting is the right one, but sometimes there might be a better way of dealing with the problem. The important thing is that they're pointing out a problem to you or an area where you can improve. And the game has benefited enormously from that feedback. In the end, I think we ended up with, we had to sort of, the original rules were a little bit more complicated, so we had to constantly try and refine the game and throw away rules to simplify the game.
And the stream of the game, so how it works. The flow.
Yes, because you don't want, analysis paralysis to set in. You don't want people to kind of spend
and some stuff for an expansion.
And leave some stuff for an expansion was.
I was having these thoughts as like.
Was the comment?
How can you complicate things with an expansion? Let's say. It's not one of the games. I think that it's easy, as you said. You said it's not easy to master because you can play it 20, 30, 40 times, and they say hey, I just know the flow. Let me see what's there. Do this and that. So I don't know when the need for the expansion will come.
I mean, there's certainly ways in which you can, introduce additional components and rules to the game to mix it up a little bit. But again, the game has to stand on its own. Has to be a good game to begin with. Viticulture is a good example, right? It's a good game by itself. You can also use the expansions, but same thing with Scythe. Again, Jamie Stegmaier. He needs the exposure from me. That's why he's desperate for the spotlight. So, I mean, those are good base games. With the expansions, they get better or different, right? But you don't need to have the expansion to have an enjoyable experience. But we are thinking about not just expansions, but also other games we can build with this sort of 2.5D concept, which is, I believe, unique to this game. I mean, we've looked around and we haven't really found any game that exploits this sort of optical illusion. And as you can see, the cascade could only be, the cascade mechanic could only exist in a game like this, where you have a clear understanding of the way gravity works and which way is down at all times, and how the water flows downhill. So it could only work with this kind of design. So we're trying to sort of capitalize on those mechanics, on those concepts. And yeah, there's a lot of other useless information in this head of mine that could turn into a theme for a game. So yeah, we may be reskinning this in the future.
We hope so. I mean, and that was my question, maybe to everybody or people watching. I haven't seen this before. I mean, okay, and the theme probably, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing with 2D, 5D, I haven't seen it before. I've seen it in King Kong probably in computer games. So you don't like them, but I'm just saying.
I like computer games. Just don't get me wrong.
But I haven't seen it. Tiles we've seen before, that's for sure.
Yes.
But in this kind of the arrangement, I think that's not. I don't know. Somebody has seen before. I think that's the rule book. I don't know if there's a final 4 or 5 pages.
Yeah,
so that gives out the simplicity of the game, and the strategy. We need to play the game, of course, to understand. And I like the artwork, by the way, on the game box.
Yeah, big kudos to Jeff. Jeff Brown is our talented artist, and he's done a phenomenal job on the art. And we actually found Jeff through his portfolio based on an image he had of ancient Babylon, of Mesopotamia, and we said that's our guy. And we've been vindicated in our decision.
Good. So thank you very much.
Thank
it
you
was
for
a
your
pleasure.
time.
Thank you, everybody. And applause. Hope for the next one. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.